Welcome back. I'm Gilaross, author of Living Beautifully and host of the Power podcast, where we share short, relatable ideas to impact and upgrade your everyday life.
My life improved when I learned to accept the apologies I never got.
Anyone has something to say about this? I was putting the class together, I think, on Sunday, and I saw the phrase, and it really made me think. Well, anyone else agree, disagree?
I mean, I agree, but I think it's really hard. Well, like, let's say my husband, hurts me without meaning to because whatever reason. I like when he apologizes. I mean, it makes me feel like my feelings matter.
I accept an apology I never got, but they're not apologizing. They are still acting the way that they acted, and they feel justified in the way that they acted. And so therefore, they'll probably do it again.
I think you're raising a good point, right? Like, if you're upset with someone, like, what are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to just pretend they apologize? Turn the other cheek? I mean, is that what are we supposed to do if we're upset with someone else?
Well, I was just with a friend of mine. And she had done something the week before that I didn't think she meant it, but it was hurtful. And I don't know, for me, it's better to just say it. So I just said, I have to get something off my chest. I started with positive, and then I said, and I don't know if you're aware of it, but you did X. And she explained what was going on, and I was fine. And she didn't have to apologize. She just said, of course I didn't mean to hurt you. It was because of this. I didn't need an apology. I needed an acknowledgement.
And what you did was actually a mitzvah, right? Because there is a mitzvah that there's the Torah. There's a phrase that the Torah says, which you shall not hate your fellow in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your fellow. And what we learn from that is, again, this is from the Torah, where it says you shall not hate your fellow in your heart. So there's a prohibition against hating other Jews. And that's number one. Then there's a second mitzvah of rebuking other people. Now, generally, when you have two different concepts that are put together in the Torah, it's there to teach us something. So the question is, why is you shall not hate your fellow in your heart as part of the sentence? And then the second part of the sentence is you shall surely rebuke your fellow.
In order to not have the hate in your heart.
Yes, you're angry, you're upset with someone else. Don't hate them in your heart. Go and talk to them about it. Right. So number one, there's an important thing to know that when we are upset with other people, because a lot of times we're in a situation where we're upset with someone else and maybe they don't even know what they did, or maybe they know that they did something, but they don't quite understand how upset you are, right? But there's actually a mitzvah to go and talk to them and explain to them what it was like for you, and obviously to try and do it in a way that is going to make them as little defensive as possible, and to do it in a diplomatic way. But that's number one. The thing is to bear in mind that it's actually a mitzvah. Is it easy?
No.
A lot of times it's easier to kind of just ignore it and pretend everything's fine than to actually go and talk to the other person. So it's helpful to know that this is actually a mitzvah from the Torah to go and do that. The thing to bear in mind, though, do you think this applies to everybody?
No.
No. Maimonides clarifies and says that someone who has a pattern of being abusive or manipulative or something like that, then you don't have to go and talk to them, because they're not going to be able to hear. And generally, when it talks about you rebuking your fellow, it's important to know that the mitzvah is only to rebuke someone who's able to hear what you have to say. So if you know that this is a person who either has done it to a lot of other people, or you've tried to speak to them in the past and they're not able to listen to, then such a person, you don't have to go and talk to them about it, right? Because they're not going to be able to listen to what you have to say. Okay, I'm going to back up a little bit. And I'm going to ask the question is, according to Judaism, do we have to forgive other people?
God deals with us the way that we deal with everybody else. So if we are that harsh in our judgment that we don't want to forgive people, then that's how God's going to deal with us.
Okay, but that's That's a beautiful idea.
What is the definition of forgiveness? Because I have my own definition of forgiveness, and it doesn't mean that I accept their behavior. It means that I'm going to let go of it for myself so I can move on.
So I think there's a difference between letting go and forgiveness. You can let go of something without forgiving someone else, I think. I'll give you an example. And I like to use sometimes a bit of extreme examples, right? Because it helps us see things clearly. Let's say you have a parent who abused a child really bad, right? And the parent never apologizes for it. And the child is able to kind of accept what happened. It doesn't mean they're going to forgive the parents, right? It doesn't mean they're going to have a relationship with the parent. I think forgiveness is forgiving what they did, right? I think it's more than just letting go of. We haven't yet answered the question of do you have to forgive or not? I mean, so far we had a very strong no.
I would imagine it depends because that's the answer to everything. But it
Yes.
seems like the healthier way to live would be to find any opportunity to forgive, so you're not living with that inside of you.
Okay. Let me
Well,
throw
and
it
does
up.
somebody need to ask for forgiveness in order for it to be given?
So I think a very, very important thing in Judaism to understand is that according to Jewish law, the onus is on the person who did wrong to gain forgiveness. There is a concept that tells us that the way that we treat others is how God treats us. So if we're kind and generous with others, God will be kind and generous with us. If we are forgiving with others, then God will be forgiving with us. And we all, I mean, talk for myself here. I definitely have things that I want God to be forgiving of me. So therefore, it's nice if we can try and forgive others. But if we look at Jewish law, there's a few things to kind of know about. So the first thing is that the onus is on the person who did wrong to ask forgiveness. For example, Yom Kippur is the day where God forgives us for our sins. And yet, the Talmud tells us that God will only forgive us for sins between us and other people if we have asked forgiveness for the other people first, right? So if I kind of say something really not nice to someone else, and I come on Yom Kippur and I say to God, I'm really sorry, I did this terrible thing, I said this not nice thing to someone else, God is not going to forgive me unless I've actually gone to that person first and said, I'm really sorry. Can you forgive me for what I did? Right? We have to, and according to Jewish law, the person has to ask 3 times, right? If the person forgives you on the first time, you're good, right? But what's considered sincere, asking for forgiveness sincerely is up to 3 times, and if necessary, using a mediator or someone else. If you think that the person's not going to be able to hear it from me right now because they're so badly hurt by what I did, maybe sending someone else, if that would help the situation. So we're talking about a serious attempt at asking for forgiveness, and I think that's very, very important to understand about Judaism. That it's yes, we can talk about our response to what we do in terms of other people and whether we forgive them or not. But when we talk about forgiveness, the onus is on the person who did wrong to ask for forgiveness, and it has to be in the context of changed behavior.
I just have to say, like, I'm sure some of you or many of you have seen this, but every year, like around Rosh Hashanah, you see on social media, if there's anybody I've heard, I'm sorry. And I think it's like ridiculous because it's a cop-out. Like, if you really hurt somebody, you know about it and you should deal with it on a one-on-one basis. I mean, has anybody seen that?
I'm debating whether I should get on my soapbox or not.
People do that
They
too.
didn't say I've been offensive.
Yeah, I know.
So there's 2 things that I want to say is, where does it come from? It comes from this place of that Yom Kippur does not forgive unless you've asked for forgiveness from other people, right? According to Jewish law, what does it mean to ask forgiveness? Putting it on social media doesn't count, right? Sending someone a text message and saying, "Will you forgive me?" doesn't count. What really counts is that you have to sit down and think to yourself, "My gosh, I did X, Y, Z. Let me go and ask that other person for forgiveness." And if you really want it to be to be effective, don't wait till Erev Yom Kippur to
Yeah,
do it,
right,
right?
exactly.
Don't let the other person stew in the hurt for it. The thing where I think that is a purpose to it is that sometimes we hurt other people and we are not aware of it. And I think where that comes from is that if it is done in a way to open up a space and to say kind of, "If I've hurt you, please come tell me," because sometimes that happens.
But
We
then
hurt other
say it to
people.
the person.
Right, but sometimes we don't know who we
Yeah.
hurt. But a blanket, "I hope you forgive me," to everyone, it's
Yeah,
not
that's
what Jewish law expects of if we're talking about, you have to ask for forgiveness 3 times and sincerely, and your mediators through Facebook, right? You're
right,
over
right.
Well, I just think there needs more marketing and advertising around this concept. Because I just don't think that people really follow that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, this is a little bit of a soapboxy one, and I wasn't intending it to go. But I think the concept of forgiveness has gotten a little bit twisted over time, because where does this idea come from? That the question is, how should we react to being asked for forgiveness? So I don't know if this is Jewish law, right? But my understanding is that we should be opening a space for forgiveness. Someone comes to you and asks you sincerely for forgiveness, then we should try and be forgiving to them. Sometimes you need to go on a healing journey first, fair enough. And in fact, the Talmud says that if someone asks you for 3 times for forgiveness sincerely, and different ways each time, and you still don't, it's considered achsariyot, which is a little bit of cruelty, right? It's a harshness, right? Yes, someone's upset you, and if you need to go and do healing for it, go and do healing. But someone sincerely, they're changing their behavior. They sincerely feel bad about it. They're coming, they're swallowing their humble pie, and they're coming to ask you for forgiveness. We should open up a space to forgive other people, right? So that's number one. The second thing is that forgiveness, if we can do it, is good for us, right? If we can let go of the hurt, even without forgiveness, if we can let go of the hurt, it's very good for us. So with those two, and then there's a third thing on top of it, which is this idea that if we are forgiving to others, that's how God is going to be forgiving to us, which is an enticing incentive to forgive others. So with these 3 concepts, there's kind of been a movement to encourage people to forgive, which is a good movement, but when you sort of divorce it from the idea that forgiveness has to be earned in Jewish law, then it does get a little bit distorted, and then you sort of have a space where people will be like, "Oh, if I hurt anyone, please forgive me," and like, "Oh, if anyone doesn't forgive me, well, they're a cruel person." No, you're distorting the text, and you're distorting the Jewish ideals. So I think there's a space for it, but I think it's gotten a little bit twisted over time. Does that kind of make sense? And yeah, we do have to, because there's 2 parts to it. There's the part of, we should try and be forgiving towards other people. And there's the part that forgiveness has to be earned. That's what it seems to be clear from Jewish law, that forgiveness has to be earned. Any thoughts, any questions, any comments on that?
Or someone has really truly harmed you, it seems to me, until you forgive that person, that keeps you stuck in that place.
So my opinion, and I could be wrong, is that those sorts of situations, I don't think you can start to think or talk about forgiveness until you've gone on your own healing. Again, I'll use a big example, right? Abuse, something like that. You're gonna tell someone who's been abused about forgiveness? Like, no, it's just the person first has to heal, accept what happens, and then whatever, maybe forgiveness will or won't happen. But you can't even begin to start to think or talk about forgiveness until you heal. The question though is that acceptance or forgiveness? And maybe it doesn't make a difference what it is.
I think there's a difference, because let's say with abuse, you can come to terms that this person abused you without thinking that it was wrong.
You can think that it's wrong.
Yeah, so in other words, like, you can stop having angst about it because they were a victim of their circumstance. I mean, most of the people that hurt others are hurt people. I mean, so
And you can do it even without justifying their behavior.
to me,
Just like that, you did something that was evil,
yeah,
and I have to let go of that and say, I'm okay with you as a human. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm not okay with your action.
So this is where I think I'm switching it up a little bit, because I think forgiveness means repairing the relationship. Like, you can accept what they did and you can let go of the hurt, but I think true forgiveness is repairing the relationship, right? Because if you think about forgiveness of someone coming and asking, can you forgive me? What they're seeking is to redress the relationship, repair the relationship. This is what Jewish law seems to say, that the onus is on the person to ask for forgiveness.
Well,
You can forgive someone who doesn't ask you for forgiveness. And I want to just point out something that when you said it, I heard you say this, is that when you talk about forgiveness, you talk about it as a later point in the process, right? Like, there's the hurt and the healing and the acceptance, and then it's the letting go. I can't deal with it. I just want to make that point and clear that, because sometimes people go through really difficult things and they're told just forgive. And the point that I want to make out is that you're not a bad person for not just forgiving, because you first have to heal from what the person did before we can even start talking about it. Again, I don't know, but from what the Jewish sources seem to teach us about forgiveness is a person has to ask for forgiveness, right? There's two parts. So yeah, you can forgive them and you can let go and you can accept it, but you're still not having a relationship with them. Right?
But
So
is that required? Let's say someone who was really nasty to you comes to you, has changed their ways right before you please, like the third one, you definitely have changed your ways. Fine, I forgive you, but I still don't want to be friends with you.
why not? If you really forgive them
If you truly forgive them,
and they've truly changed.
maybe because your trust has been broken.
Yeah,
but if it's true if you've truly forgiven them, then they should have the opportunity to rebuild the trust.
And I'm going to throw this out here now. I'm curious to hear what you think. Is that maybe we cheapen the word forgiveness when we say, and again, I think there's an acceptance and a letting go. I'm not sure it's the same as forgiveness, though. I think forgiveness is a beautiful thing that can happen, but it needs both parts. It needs two
Well,
parties.
I just feel like what you're explaining, like, then most of the time we're not gonna really ever get forgiveness. Like, forgiveness is really hard to attain.
I'm going to challenge it, and again, I'm curious to hear. You can challenge me back as well. But I think 90% of the things, and that's whatever. I pulled that number up, so whatever. Right? The vast majority of the times that I'll give you an example. Right? I get short with my kid and I yell at them. Right? I know I did wrong. I know I have to apologize and ask for forgiveness for them. And if I'm genuine about it and I say sorry to my kid for yelling at, I'm sorry that I lost my temper and I yelled at you and I'm going to try not to yell at you. Most of the time, my kid's going to forgive me for it. Right? Most of the time, those are the times where we have the forgiveness, right? Like, those are the things where we're hurting people, usually the people that are closest to us, in little ways. And the more we kind of acknowledge and ask for forgiveness for those things, the more we become people that other people can turn around to us and say, you know what? It really wasn't nice that we arranged to go out on Wednesday and then last minute you just cancelled me. Like, I really felt like you didn't care, whatever it was, right? So I think that forgiveness can kind of happen. And it does happen, and it should happen in our relationships.
So in those instances, yes. Like, and I practice that with a lot of my friends, and these little tiny like micro fights or whatever. Like, I had a friend just today. She's like, I was really annoyed that like you changed your plan last minute and you came a day late. And then I was like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't real like I shouldn't have made a commitment to that. And then that was it. Like, she came to me, she told me, and then I was like, okay. So, but I feel like if we can practice in these little situations, and then we can, make it a bigger part of our life.
And it's a beautiful thing when you think about it, like forgiveness in those, right? So, because imagine if we didn't have the tool of forgiveness, right? And she was upset with you and you didn't really have a way to to repair them. Like if you think about it, like it's a gift, this forgiveness.
And then it goes
because-
away like that.
Yeah, it goes away because
Yeah.
you can't go say, oh, your friend tells you, you know, I'm really sorry you can't. You can't be like, okay, fine, let's wind the clock back and we'll do it, right? You can't do that, but you can instead acknowledge and take ownership for it, and it repairs the relationship.
Well, and be conscious of it in the future time, not to do that if you
Well,
can avoid
Yeah,
it.
but I also think it's a beautiful thing with kids, because then we're teaching our kids also forgiveness.
Right.
And how to ask for forgiveness, and maybe you did something to hurt someone else, and so in that sense, I think it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I think in the bigger things, it can be done. It's just hard, and sometimes you have to rebuild trust in a relationship, right? Like, you know, forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean it's an ask and once and done, right? Like if it's a big deal that someone did something, then it can be rebuilt, but it could take time. It could take, you know, months of the trust being rebuilt, but both parties kind of have to be open to that process of rebuilding. There's a whole
Didn't
other
get
part
to
that we
number
didn't get
six.
to. We've got 5 minutes. We can just so we spoke about forgiveness and repairing relationships and strengthening them. Do you think there are ever times where we have to let go of relationships?
Oh, yeah.
That seems like it was a pretty unanimous yes, right? I think we started this course by talking about the importance of having positive relationships. And it's important to understand that the same places, which is Pirkei which talk about the importance of having positive relationships, also says is a source is taken from Pirkei. It says, distance yourself from evil. We could call it bad. A bad neighbor. Do not befriend a bad person. One, and do not despair of the arrival of punishment. And what it's telling us here is that just like it's important to have those positive relationships in our lives, we have to be real and honest and recognize that negative relationships have a negative impact on us. And interestingly, it says, do not despair of the arrival of punishment, is because sometimes when we're hurt by someone else, we can get so eaten up by the injustice of it, right? Like, especially, you know, if that person that hurt you has got stature or prestige, and it feels like so unjust. How could they do that and get away with it? And Pirkei says, don't worry, don't despair of punishment, right? You should know that there's justice. We may not see it here, but there is justice in the world, and don't worry about that, because this person will have justice taken to them. So two things that I'm going to kind of end with is that what should our attitude be when we have to let go of a relationship? So this is a story from the Talmud. Reb Meir once saw a group of people that were bad people, and he turned around and he prayed, and he prayed to God that they be destroyed. And his wife said to him, that shouldn't be a prayer. She said, pray that their wickedness be destroyed. And I think that's our really, when we look at people who are having a negative impact on us, the more we can kind of look at them with, I don't know what the right word is compassion, because a lot of times these people that are having a negative impact on us are people who are not healthy, right? They're not emotionally healthy. They're not able of having healthy emotional relationships, and it's actually very sad if you think about it. So the more we can feel sorry for them, doesn't mean you have to have a relationship with them, but the more we can kind of look at them through the lens of compassion, the better it is for us. And there's two sort of questions to ask ourselves before we have to decide with whether to let go of a relationship or not. And I want to just say something. It's a very, very hard thing to do, right? Because we have to be honest with ourselves, because sometimes a relationship is fun, or it's exciting, or, you know, letting go of a relationship means letting go of different things. And that's why it's very helpful to have someone who we can discuss these things with, whether it's a mentor, whether it's an objective friend, right? Someone that can really look at it, because what do we want to look at is, what is the impact on me, right? Me being in this relationship with this person, what is the impact on me? Is it that every time I spend time with them, it impacts me negatively? Then maybe that's a relationship that we have to look at. And the two sort of questions to ask is the other person willing to change? Do they want to change? Because if they don't want to change, there's nowhere to go. And even if they are willing to change, am I willing to be patient in their process of change? Because change takes time. So those are the questions to kind of look at before we have to answer the question of, do we keep this relationship or do we let it go? All right, so we discussed a lot tonight from
Was that the
forgiveness.
caution?
The caution is it's very hard to make these decisions on our own because we can be very clouded. So it's very good to have someone that we can discuss it with, whether it's a mentor, whether it's an objective friend. That's the caution.
So, okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I'd love to hear your feedback, and if you enjoyed this episode, you'll love my book, Living Beautifully: How to Bring Meaning, Joy, and Love into Your Life, based on the timeless wisdom of Pirkei Avot. And please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss out. Have a wonderful day.